In this video, I'm going to show you the secret cause of depression that once I discovered allowed me to overcome over 10 years of depression without taking any medication whatsoever. So before we can look into what the secret cause of depression is, we need to understand what exactly is depression. So we can generally define depression as the persistent feelings of sadness and a loss of joy with previously enjoyable activities. So what does this mean? So for someone who has depression, generally speaking, they are in a low mood for generally most of the time. Their mood may go up and may go down, but generally speaking, it always returns to being in a low state. So they generally move back into this feeling of sadness. Because of this, it's very difficult to enjoy the activities that they used to find fun. And so over time, things become a bit pointless. It feels like there's no point in doing anything because they can't actually feel the feelings that they used to have. The things they used to enjoy no longer have value. So the question is, why? Why is it that some people have depression and some people don't? What could be different about these two people? So let's explore this a little bit more. So here we have what we can call an emotional scale. So we have joy on this side and we have sadness on this side, with increasing amounts of joy when we move up to the left here, and increasing amount of sadness when we move down to the right here. And in the middle, we have feelings of what we can call just neutral feelings. So neither feeling joy, neither feeling sadness, somewhere in the middle, feeling neutral. So to understand the difference between somebody who has depression and someone who doesn't, let's look at the example of someone who does not have depression. So someone who doesn't have depression, generally speaking, their emotional state, their default emotional state will be here. So generally speaking, they'll have neutral feelings. Until they take part in an activity or something happens that they like or that they prefer, they will start moving up the emotional scale towards joy. So they'll start feeling more happier. So maybe somebody receives good news. Then they start moving up the emotional scale. Their feelings move up this way towards joy. And once the experience is over, once they've understood what the news was and they no longer have to think about it, then they simply move back down into the neutral state. And this is something, again, that's quite automatic. They're not doing it purposefully. It's just what happens, and we'll explain later why. But generally speaking, no matter what happens, they always return to this emotional state of neutrality. And if, let's say, they receive bad news, let's say something happened that they would not prefer to happen. Let's say, I don't know, they hurt themselves by mistake. Then, generally speaking, their emotions will move down the emotional scale towards sadness. That makes sense, right? So, how is this different compared to somebody who has depression? So for someone who has depression, the key difference is their emotional set point, their default emotional set point, won't be here in neutrality. Instead, it would be somewhere along here, somewhere along the sadness side of the emotional scale. So let's say possibly here. So this is actually their starting point here. So they already are in the feelings of sadness before anything's already happened. So this means, let's say, for example, they experience something that they prefer, something they like, something that they enjoy. Their mood will increase, but what's happening is they're still moving up the emotional scale, but they're simply reducing the amount of sadness that they are already feeling, and they are moving to a state of neutrality, and they may possibly also move into states of some joy, so they may feel some happiness. But the difference is, eventually, once that's over, they will move back down to this set point here. So back into the state of sadness. It's like an elastic band. It always returns back to the default set point. And if they experience something that makes them feel even more sad, they will still move down the emotional scale, and then eventually they'll move back up. So they're still feeling emotions of sadness, they will still have a low mood, but then they simply will always come back to this area here. So it means that most of the time they are always stuck in this area here of perpetual sadness. So that explains generally what depression is and how somebody would experience it on a day-to-day. So why is this? Why is it that you can have someone who has an emotional set point that's neutral, and you can have someone who has an emotional set point where it's stuck in sadness? It all boils down to understanding the mind, but specifically we need to understand the relationship between its two main parts, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. So the conscious mind is what we are generally used to experiencing. It's the part of our mind where we do our thinking, when we remember things, when we have trains of thought going through our minds, when we can visualize things, when we're calculating things or working something out in our mind. That's all happening in our conscious mind. We can use the word conscious in the same way we would use the word aware. So the things we are aware of in our mind, that's taking place in our conscious mind. The subconscious mind is the exact opposite. We don't have access to it normally. It's essentially hidden from our access. This means that this makes things interesting because the subconscious mind makes up most of our mind, and it's said that 95% or even more of our mind is the subconscious mind. So, to be honest, this diagram, I probably shouldn't make it half-half, but it'll be a bit difficult to make it like this and write the conscious mind, but that'll be accurate. So really it's more like this. That this is the conscious mind, this shaded part here, and the rest of it is the subconscious mind, but it's hidden away. And this is why it's so difficult for people to get out of depression, because most of the mind is hidden away. And this is the relation it has to depression. Because we have to understand how the subconscious mind works in relation to the conscious mind. So, in the same way that the conscious mind is anything that you have to think about, the subconscious mind, which is the opposite, is everything that you don't have to think about. So any bodily processes that you have, such as your heart pumping, the blood going around your body, the electrical signals going through you, your body's ability to heal, to grow, those kind of things, that's all controlled by the subconscious mind. It does it automatically. It's kind of like how if you have like your laptop, there are certain things that you can actively choose to do, like in your conscious mind, but there are things happening automatically in the background. That would be like your subconscious mind. So you don't have to worry about all those processes. It does it for you. And that's the reason why, for example, you can breathe, because it's doing automatically, until of course you consciously decide to choose to do it. But apart from that, the same with blinking, apart from that, it does the job on its own. This also means it's not just your bodily processes that are controlled by the subconscious mind, but also your habits are too. So for example, let's say you were to practice riding a bike or playing an instrument. The more that you practice it, the more eventually it becomes automatic and it goes into your subconscious mind. This is important to understand because it all boils down to this. Repetition. So it boils down to repetition. So the reason why, for example, you don't have to think about riding a bike is because you've done it so many times through practice, through repetition, that it's now become automatic. So now it's in the subconscious mind. So for example, when you first started to ride a bike, you had to use your conscious mind to think about riding the bike. The more you did that, the repetition, eventually it went into your subconscious mind and it's automatic. Now you get on the bike and off you go. You don't have to think about it. Your body does everything automatically. What we could say is that through repetition, there's a program now in your mind. And that program is for riding the bike, all the processes involved for doing that. Now, how does this relate to depression? So we've covered that the subconscious mind controls bodily functions that you don't have to think about. We've also covered that it covers your habits as well, but these are physical actions. So your biological processes, that's physical, and your habits also involved your physical body having to do things. But it's not just the physical aspects of you that your subconscious mind controls, also your mental processes too. So it's not just physical activities, but mental activities too. And by that I mean your thoughts. So in the same way, if you kept practicing through repetition, learning to ride a bike, if you kept thinking a thought over and over and over again, that too would become automatic. And this is the key here, because if you think about the kinds of thoughts we have on a daily basis, there is this general belief that sometimes people have that what goes on in their mind isn't that important, but it's extremely, extremely important because it controls your subconscious mind. What this means is that if there's somebody who, for various reasons that I will explain and get into, if for various reasons they are talking negatively about themselves, they keep thinking things like if they're being harsh towards themselves, saying, "Oh, I didn't do that thing right," or "I should have done this better," or if they start just being, just unkind to themselves, but in their thoughts, and if they keep doing that repetitively over and over and over again, that creates a program in the mind. So then in the same way that through riding the bike, with enough repetition, with enough practice, that became automatic, the negative self-talk will become automatic. But what happens is they won't even have to think about it. It will just happen like that. It becomes automatic. And then, with enough practice, with enough repetition of that, they won't even realize that it's happening. Because as I explained before, the subconscious mind is hidden from us. So, think about it this way. If this is a conscious mind, and let's say you have a thought, let's say that's T for thought. You keep thinking it over and over and over and over again, just over and over and over again. Every time you do that, it's slowly moving into the subconscious, becoming automatic, until it goes into the subconscious and now you can't access it anymore. It's become automatic. And this is where our habits come from. It's the reason why sometimes you may notice yourself thinking things and you think, why am I thinking that? Your subconscious mind is doing it. It's producing those thoughts. So how this relates to depression is this, because it's not just physical activities repeated, it's not just mental activities repeated, but life experiences repeated too. But most importantly, the meaning that we assign to the life experience through the repetition of that creates something. It creates beliefs. So, let's say I use my own life as an example to explain this. So this is a timeline, so let's just call this, let's say, time. Let's say this is age 0, And let's just say, just say 20 as an age. So, to use my own life as an example to explain how, for me, depression was created, how it was formed in me. So, at the age of 5, if we again were talking about the repetition of life experiences and the meanings that we assign to it, at the age of 5, I experienced what would be called a primary trauma, or what we can call an inner child wound, where I witnessed my dad being abusive towards my mum right in front of me, and various other issues surrounding that and before that too. But the main thing is that this was a traumatic experience. So let's put T for trauma. The meaning as a 5-year-old I would have assigned to that, I can assume would have been incredibly negative, because, well, it would have been, right? But let's just put M for meaning as well. So I assigned a meaning, and we'll get into explaining what that is in a moment. So trauma, and then there's meaning that I assigned to it. And then throughout my life, dotted around, there was lots of stress, lots of further traumatic experiences as well, unfortunately. And then as this continues, at the age of, let's say, 7, 9, 10, let's say 15, etc., it keeps going over and over. I continuously had traumatic and stressful experiences. Therefore, I kept assigning meanings to these over and over again. And here's a repetition there, see? Meanings, negative meanings, different traumas. So we have here a pattern. Traumas, repeatedly, meanings being assigned to them over and over and over again. Of course, there's a repetition of thoughts because of these meanings, which then ultimately will go into the subconscious. And when thoughts are repeated over and over and over again, when meaning is repeated over and over and over again, meanings that we've assigned to life experiences, it creates a belief in the subconscious. So let's put B for belief. Once a belief is in the subconscious, it's running there like a program. So for me, the meanings I would have assigned over and over again ultimately boil down to this. Being powerless. So, to summarize and to explain what the secret cause of depression is, the secret cause of depression is a belief, or actually, to be more accurate, the secret cause of depression is a subconscious belief in being powerless. So imagine this, a 5-year-old witnessing their dad being abusive towards their mum. I would have felt incredibly powerless. So that meaning was assigned. This also meant that because this belief started to form, all other experiences that also put me in a situation where I didn't feel I had power, again, that's just being, this meaning is being assigned over and over again, and it's only enhancing and making the original belief stronger. And if so, this is exactly why depression was formed, or why I experienced it for 10 years, probably more than 10 years to be honest. Because essentially, my mind was being conditioned to believe that I was completely powerless. So again, to remind you of what the secret cause of depression is, it's a belief, it's a subconscious belief that you are powerless, a subconscious belief in powerlessness. So why is this important? Because once somebody has this belief, we can call it a core belief, because we'll have many beliefs, but once someone has a core belief, a subconscious core belief in powerlessness, this alters their perception of themselves, alters their perception of what they experience too. So this means that essentially, growing up, I went through life feeling powerlessness because I had this belief, because of life experiences, that I was powerless. And I believe this is essentially what's happening in a huge amount of cases, maybe all cases for depression. Because think about, if you have depression, or if you know somebody who has depression, I'm pretty certain that somewhere in their experience there is a belief that they are powerless. So I'll give you an example, okay? This is a very common one. Let's say you have two people. You have person A, person B, they're in a relationship, and let's say they break up. Now, let's say person A doesn't want to really break up, so keeps trying to get back with person B. And let's say person B keeps saying no, okay? This is a common thing. This is often a recipe for depression for person A, because if you think about it, they're constantly trying to get to them and they're constantly being told no. Person A is likely to feel powerless because there is now a situation they cannot resolve, there is something they cannot get, and they might keep trying and trying and trying. This is often why people become powerless. And again, think about any situation involving depression. I'm quite certain that there are feelings of being powerless and that there is a belief somewhere there of being powerless. And for me, this all changed once I realized this, once I discovered this, because the solution is to do the exact opposite. You want to create a core belief, a core subconscious belief that you have power. And that's the difference between someone who has depression, someone who doesn't. Someone who doesn't have depression, they know they don't have that belief that they're powerless. They have a more balanced belief. That doesn't mean that they think they can do anything. Maybe they can, but they certainly don't think that they are powerless and they can't do things. That that it's futile. There's nothing they can do about it. Okay, so now that we've covered the secret behind depression, let's look at what the solution is. Now, this is exactly what I used. Specifically, the third one is I believe is the solution that has been largely missed out. But to really understand why this works, we need to understand the other ones surrounding it. So the first thing to do is, if you do have depression, it sounds obvious, but it's really not. You need to accept exactly the experience that you're having. I know that as humans, our normal reaction when we experience some kind of pain is to try to get away from it, and that's understandable. But the reality is, if you keep mentally or physically trying to distance yourself from this experience that you're having, in the long run it doesn't help. Part of being able to accept it is being able to understand why you have depression. So look at your past. In the example I showed you in my own past, for example, it becomes pretty clear as to why I experienced it. So part of accepting and understanding it, for example, was going for therapy. This is something I highly recommend. It will help you to accept that you have depression. It will help you to understand the reasons why. Because often when we don't have an understanding of something, we end up fearing it, which is often why we don't accept it. Often we can be in denial of it too. And that just ensures that the problem continues. And ultimately, it means you're going to be stuck in depression and it will continue. It doesn't get better on its own. And that's because, as we explained before, it's down to the subconscious mind and the emotions that are tied to it. So once you're able to fully accept, or at least begin to accept, that you are having the experience of depression, and notice my words there, I said having the experience of depression, and I'll get to that later. Once you understand the reasons for why you have depression, we need to start then actively changing certain things. So, if we have established that thinking negatively or thinking over and over again something eventually turns into a subconscious belief, this works both ways, whether it's positive or negative. But if someone who has depression, because of their life experiences, now has a perception of their reality and of themselves that's going to be skewed more towards the negative. This is, for example, why having depression and low self-worth are directly connected. The first thing you want to do is to observe your thoughts. So if you have depression, observe your thoughts, see what kind of thoughts are you thinking on a daily basis. Are they helpful thoughts? Are they unhelpful? Are you putting yourself down repeatedly over and over and over again, which is only going to feed that subconscious belief of powerlessness? and the feelings of low self-worth. So look at your thoughts, observe them. And I know this is not something that comes naturally to everyone. It depends on various factors. But what you can do is just get into the practice every day, maybe every hour, just observing what's going on in my mind. What have I been thinking recently? The more you do this repeatedly, again, there's the repetition again to build up the habit in your mind. The more you repeatedly observe your thoughts, you'll begin to get a clear picture of the kind of thoughts that are going around your mind and all the stories you tell about yourself or about other people or about the world. And you'll be able to see, is this helpful? Is this making me feel good about myself or my life? Or is it unhelpful? Is it making me feel powerless? Again, feeding that subconscious belief in powerlessness, which is where depression comes from. Once you've observed it, you can readily see, the next step is to start changing your thoughts. So, let's say this is a thought, okay? And the thought comes into your mind and it's negative. Let's say it's like, oh, you didn't do that good enough, for example. And let's say that's a common thought. Imagine this is actually somebody saying this to you. You don't have to accept this thought. You don't have to believe it. It's entirely your choice. But I know that we can get into the habit of experiencing a thought and then just believing that that's us. And that's believing the thought. You don't have to believe the thought. It's a choice. So observe the thought. See it for what it is. It's just an opinion. And you can simply ignore it. Or you can change it. So by ignoring it, I mean you can simply divert your attention elsewhere. Because the moment you attach yourself to a thought, you give it power. And so you're essentially giving energy to that subconscious belief of powerlessness, which just keeps the depression going. So the thought comes in, the unhelpful thought comes in, observe it. You can question it, just as you might question if somebody said something negative to you. You can question it. You can think, is this really true? Do I have to believe this? Is there a point? And you can simply move on to something else, simply ignore it. Or, because I know that's not always easy, look at the thought and change it. Okay, maybe what it's saying is true. However, there's this other side, and you can think of positive things to counterbalance that unhelpful thought. And through the practice and repetition of observing your thoughts, not believing them and then changing them to something more helpful, something more positive. And again, when I'm saying positive, negative, I know it's somewhat subjective. So some thoughts that might seem negative are actually helpful. So it's better to see it as whether it's a genuinely helpful thought or an unhelpful thought. So observe your thoughts, change the thoughts that are unhelpful to more balanced, more positive ones, more helpful ones. That way, you're doing two things. You're not feeding the subconscious belief in powerlessness anymore. You're reducing what's going in there, so it gradually is weakening. And you're also detaching from that thought as well. You're not identifying with it anymore. Again, through repetition. You're also, by creating helpful, positive thoughts, more balanced thoughts, through the repetition of that, now you are creating a core belief that's more balanced, one that's more empowering, one that's more empowering to you. This is, once I learned this literally lifted me up from the worst of depression and started taking me to higher and higher places emotionally, where it wasn't my mind running me, I was now running my mind. Because the mind is just a tool, right? It's a tool we use to interact with ourselves and with everything else. But the moment we don't know, once we don't know this, once we don't understand that we can observe and change our thoughts, it runs us. And that's why I think depression is such a big issue now, because people don't realize that they can do this. They were never taught this. Nobody was really taught this. Well, most of us weren't taught this, I should say. So they get attached to their thoughts and they believe that's them. And so they have thoughts because of their life experiences repeatedly over and over again that make them feel powerless, make them feel bad about themselves. They believe these thoughts, and it just perpetuates this cycle of depression over and over again. So once you learn to observe your thoughts and change them to more helpful ones, then you also need to understand the emotional component to this too, because it's not just thoughts. I know that when people feel depressive thoughts, or when you feel negative, what we will call negative thoughts, we usually just want to get away from them as soon as possible. So we turn to what we can call coping mechanisms, food, drink, TV, I don't know, there's millions of things, right? I know that your instinct is to get away from it and to go to your coping mechanisms, or to deny it's there, or to suppress it even. That doesn't help. Short term, maybe, but in the long term, ironically, because you're repeatedly suppressing it, because you're repeatedly running away from it, like I did, to be honest, all you are doing is repeatedly reinforcing that, which ultimately will make you feel more powerless because the feeling keeps coming back. So again, there's a futility there. Futility is a big part of depression, where you're trying to stop the feeling of depression by suppressing it with coping mechanisms and other things, but it keeps coming back. That just makes you more depressed in the long run. See, it feeds the subconscious belief of powerlessness. It feeds the depression. And the final part is to do with your habits, so to do with your actual physical actions every day. So what you want to do is to create habits that are related to power. So in the same way that through the repetition of experiences and the meaning that you've assigned, which were feeding the subconscious belief in powerlessness, what you want to do to feed the new subconscious belief of power is to create habits, daily habits, related to empowering you. So for example, you can start small, and you can start, for example, let's say you make your bed every single day. Let's say you tidy your room every single day, you tidy your house every single day. By doing this every day, what you are doing is you are feeding and creating a subconscious belief of that you have power, that you have control. Because when we have the opposite, when we have depression, and we have the subconscious belief in powerlessness, we are not in control of a particular situation or multiple situations, which are then, of course, feeding that subconscious belief in powerlessness. So start every day looking for ways that you can create small habits, maybe large habits every day, like exercise, for example, that will over time build up this subconscious belief of power. The reason why, for example, exercise works so well is because through that practice every single day, it's not just the biological change that happens, which is a big part of it, of course. It's also the fact that you are creating in your mind that subconscious belief that you have control over something, that you have power, even if it's just in one particular part of your life. Over time, through creating that core belief of powerlessness, through creating that core belief of power, you are now essentially helping yourself to create power and control in other parts of your life as well. So this is the solution, but generally speaking, this one here, the observation of your thoughts and changing your thoughts, so the ability to observe and to not identify with your thoughts, that's the key here. But to get to that point, you do need to first accept the situation you're in, accept the feelings of depression, and understand why you're experiencing depression as well. And notice I'm saying experiencing depression, because you are not the depression, you are having the experience. So you are not identified with the experience, it's something you are having. And this part here can come from going with things like therapy. I highly recommend it. This will help with this part here. In your daily life, though, you want to be focusing on these things here, these last three. So observing your thoughts, changing them to more helpful ones, feeling the emotions, not resisting them, and creating habits, physical habits that are related to power, so you can, through all of these things, create the subconscious belief in power and having control. And also you want to let go of the habits and the thoughts that are not helpful, that are contributing to feelings of powerlessness. So there you have it. Based on my own experiences and overcoming over 10 years of depression, that's the root cause of depression, and that's the solution. Thank you for watching. I sincerely hope this helps you, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.